It's time to level up. I'm going to show you how to make chainmail, specifically the European 4-in-1 weave. To make this chainmail, you will need a pair of hook nose pliers and a pair of needle nose pliers, and of course, chainmail rings. To hopefully make this easier to follow, I decided to use a larger ring than typically used for chainmail projects. Typically, what you're going to have is this size of a ring, which is a 16 gauge 5/16 inch. I opted for using a 16 gauge 7/16 inch, which is what's here right now, to hopefully make the weaving process easier to see. And I also opted for using 2 different colors of metal to also make the weave process easier to see. Alright, to start you will take your center ring, and we're going to use the stainless steel ring for that, and hold it in your hook nose plier, and then put on 4 of the fully closed rings, and then use your needle nose plier to carefully and fully close that center silver ring. Once you do that, you have officially created your first little 4-in-1. Closing that center ring fully is absolutely vital if you do not want your rings to hook and catch on your hair and clothes. A great way to section off the work of a chainmail project, because it does involve quite a bit of work, is to go ahead and prep your rings, so open half of them, fully close the other half, and then make a bunch of these 4-in-1 groupings, so that when the time comes to actually put the pieces together and make the sheets of chainmail, you're good to go. And here's what those 4-in-1 groupings will look like. Now we're going to join them up together to make a strip of chainmail. To do this, you'll want to make sure that that center ring, so the one in your 4-in-1, is facing the same direction. It doesn't matter whether that direction is all facing down like I had them before, or all facing up like I just rearranged them here. They just all need to be facing the same direction before you link the joining rings to them. And now we will join them together. Take an opened ring, and you want to weave it down and out through the first top ring of your 4-in-1, and then from the bottom and up from the other ring, and then join it to the bottom 2 rings of your other 4-in-1, up through the bottom on both of them. You'll then take that center ring, that silver one you just put through, and fully close it. This I struggled filming a little bit because I have to bring it closer because I'm filming it, but it shouldn't be that big of a struggle for you when you go, unless you're deciding to film it too. And if you hooked your ring in correctly, after a little bit of fiddling, you should be able to get it to lay flat always. And that's what it will look like after you join 2 4-in-1 groupings together. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat that process down and up through the one ring, and from the bottom and up through the second, and then you're going to go from the bottom and up to the 2 bottom rings of the above 4-in-1 grouping. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that you can see it well enough in the video. It is a bit of a tricky process to show because your hand's gonna get in the way when filming. So if you have any questions, you can absolutely leave them for me, and I can hopefully better explain a step that you're having trouble with. This is footage of me struggling to close it because I was trying to not bring it up to the camera to do it again so I could lay it flat while I closed it, but obviously that didn't work. So here's what it looks like now, and this is 3 4-in-1 groupings. When you're making a chainmail project, what you will do is just make strips of these 4-in-1 groupings for as long as you need for what your project requires, and just make as many of them as you need for the width as well, and then you will join them up together. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm only going to do 3 4-in-1 groupings and 2 strips. So we're going to make a square essentially, because it's just a lot easier to show in a tutorial than making a whole entire project. For our second strip, we're going to repeat the exact same process we just had on the first one. So we're going to have our center rings all facing up, and we're going to join them together in that same weave that we did before. And coming up, this is a good example of what I meant, where if you weave your rings in correctly, even if it looks like it's all twisted and it doesn't lay right, if you just fiddle around with it for a bit, you will be able to get it to lay correctly. However, if you cannot get it to lay correctly, that is an indication that somewhere along the line you have woven one of the rings in an incorrect manner. So see how it looked a little hopeless there for a second, but in actuality, the weave is correct. It just got a little bit tangled on itself. that does tend to happen with a wider diameter ring, like I'm using in these. They do tend to kind of like flip around on each other more, which is why for most chainmail projects you will be using that 5/16 inch. That's why most chainmail projects will be in that size and not this 7/16 inch. And now that we have our second strip of 3 4-in-1 groupings, we can go ahead and join them together. Now for this process, again, you want to make sure all of your center rings are facing the same direction on both strips. When you have them lined up beside each other, you can actually see here as well this new 4-in-1 grouping that you are going to make with this joining ring. And again, that's why it's so important that all of your center rings will be facing the same direction and all of the outside rings, so the gold rings, are facing the same direction as well. So you're going to go from the bottom and up on both of the rings on either side. So it's from the bottom and up on all of these rings. And you want to make sure that you're following the pattern that the outside rings, the brass rings, are laying. And again, you're going to make sure that that center, that silver ring, is fully closed. Again, I have to bring it up a little closer to really get a good grip on it with my needle nose plier. But I'm telling you, you do not want gaps in your rings, or your hair and your clothes will face the consequences. So once again, if you've woven your rings incorrectly, all will lay flat, and you can see how we have made a new 4-in-1 right there in the center between the two strips. And so now you're going to continue the process, and your top rings on your 4-in-1 will be the bottom rings of the previous or the above 4-in-1 grouping. Right below where I'm pointing on this frame, I feel like is a perfect example of really highlighting that this center silver ring you're incorporating is creating the center ring for a 4-in-1 grouping. Once you learn the weave, it becomes really simple to make chainmail projects, fix chainmail projects, find your mistakes and correct them. So I really highly suggest getting very familiar with whatever weave it is that you are going to do a project in. I would suggest the 4-in-1 for starting out, but really familiarize yourself with the ins and outs of how that pattern and how that weave works, because it will make your life so much easier in the long run. And with that, we have our chainmail square. And so you can see with the two different color metals, if you really look at it, you can see how it is those two separate strips and just a bunch of 4-in-1 groupings. And all of those center rings, all of those the ones in the 4-in-1s are all facing the same direction, and all of the brass rings are facing the same direction as well. So even if it gets crumpled up and jumbled around, you can always lay it down flat and the pattern will find its shape again. And that is the European 4-in-1 chainmail weave. It's a fairly simple weave to start with, but it gives you a lot of variety, and most projects that you tackle will be like this piece right here, just more strips added together to add width and length. And with that, happy chainmailing, and I can't wait to see what you make.